Welcome to Champagne Chit Chats with DJ Wildflower. This is your quick dive into the lives of incredible people working in the events and entertainment industry. We talk about their journeys, their favourite moments, and their top tips for creating unforgettable events. Next up is a very special guest, a drummer, rehearsal studio owner, and band manager. Thank you so much for joining me, Rob Nassif.
Great to be here. Stoked.
Professional intro. I've known you as a mate for a long time, and I know you have this incredible CV, but it's always nice to give a bit of a professional introduction. But for those who don't know you, can you give me a bit of a background about who you are and what you do in the entertainment industry?
Sure. I guess I was the drummer for a band called Gyroscope that I started when I was 15 in high school with a friend of mine, Zoran. We ended up having like a 23-year career. I left the band in 2019. After 23 years, we released 4 albums. We're very lucky to make it our career for a good chunk of that time. We had a #1 album in 2008, a #3 album in 2010, toured Australia, recorded albums across the world. And honestly, it was like just the greatest way to spend your 20s that you could ever hope for, and part of my 30s. Still great mates with all the guys. And sort of out of that, bought the rehearsal space where Gyroscope wrote all our albums at. So back then it was called R&R Studios. Really disgusting, flea ball infested place, which is great.
Good place to pay your dues.
Yeah, we paid our dues there. We wrote all 4 albums there, and I actually worked there for the previous owner and was always thinking like, how can we make it better? We could do this, we could do that.
Yeah.
Eventually convinced that owner to sell it to me in 2010. And that's why I say it's good that it was like really run down, because I could have never afforded buying that business otherwise. But it was really on its last legs. Bought it in 2010, rebranded it, called it the Henhouse Rehearsal Studios, put artwork, and we've just really spent the last 14 years with the Henhouse, just continually improving it. You know, we built an extra 7 rooms in 2012. In 2021, when we got to really know each other, we rebuilt the original 8 spaces in the original studio. We added DJ studios, podcast studios, a recording studio. Yep. And then as part of all of that, I started managing bands in 2016, a band called The Faim, who ended up touring the world.
Hugely successful.
Having a great, did very well in France and Germany, and it was really cool. They played all the major festivals across Europe, Reading and Leeds Festival, Download Festival, Rock am Ring, Rock in the Park, Lollapalooza. So that was great. And then I managed another band called RedHook, who are the little baby band that have just been like chipping away for like 5 years now, who I think this November 2024 should have a top 10 album here in Australia. And they just played their biggest tour. And then we'll be opening some rehearsal studios in Melbourne in 2025.
What a CV.
Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
So I'm just going to take a step back and talk about how we got to meet, which was through the Henhouse. Yes. We got to meet during the old Rona lockdown times.
Yes.
And the reason why is because as a performer, I was DJing online, everything went virtual, and I needed a space. So I had a look online, and it was at a time where I wasn't really sure about what a rehearsal studio was like. Yeah. I'm in a band. So I was like, I didn't really know what that would look like. So approached you about using a studio as a space. Yeah. And it was amazing because as a lowly DJ in the cool, give us a rundown of some of the bands that have played at the Henhouse.
Oh yeah, everyone from bigger bands, like we actually had a couple of members of Guns N' Roses down there, then like Carnival, Birds of Tokyo, Temper Trap, Veronica's, Thin Lizzy, the 5 Seconds of Summer, it goes on.
Absolute rock royalty, Gyroscope obviously being...
I'll forget them.
So the Henhouse, I knew of it when I came in. You've got the Henhouse Wall of Fame. You've got all the people who've rehearsed there, artists who come by and just want to sort of tweak their sets. Yeah. And then coming in as a DJ, using the space as a virtual live stream studio. So we got to know each other really well because we did the virtual events for about 3 years. Yeah. About 6 months in Sydney, and so we really felt like quite embedded in the space there.
Honestly, Kate, it was so lovely having you there because you also brought such great energy to the space, and it was different.
It was different.
I was like, we hadn't up until that point, because you were actually there before we did the DJ studios. Yes. We had never had anything like that. So when you approached Tom and and Tom told me about it, I was like, yeah, wow, great.
Yeah.
For sure.
And you made us so welcome. And then over a period of time, you did a series of renovations and created DJ-specific rehearsal studio.
That's right. And I want the record to show that when I was thinking about that, I approached you to ask all
You did.
advice, because you were actually the only DJ I knew. Which is so funny to say when you're like, I'm going to start a DJ for Rehearsal studio.
Yes.
I know one DJ. So it was so weird because you were like educating me.
Yeah. Such an honor to be the only DJ. And now you're like the dude that knows all the DJs in Perth because everyone comes to the hen house.
I know, and it's lovely. And I mean, there was many times where I was saying, God, this is so bizarre. You know, like I'm opening a DJ studio. I can't DJ. I don't know DJs. I don't know the DJ community. But you really helped me. Thank you. And you gave me great advice, which was, don't rush to buy the CDJ 3000s. They've only just come out. Stick to the CDJ 2000s for now because they're still going to be in the clubs for another couple of years. And I listened to that advice and it's held true.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that was helpful.
No problem.
And I enjoy using both the studios because they're both available. So that's something that we love to do.
Great.
Clearly, when we're talking about in this podcast, it's about entertainment and events.
Yeah.
For you, I'm sort of going to be talking more about the entertainment space.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you what led you to pursue a career in the entertainment world versus like in terms of being an artist, like did you view it as a career? Did you just view this as something that you were taking as it was, or was there a specific plan?
Well, the great thing about starting a band when you're 15 with your buddy that you met at your friend's grade 9 sleepover birthday party is that you really think anything's possible. You're just like, I want to be a rock star. Bring it on. I can't wait. And the great thing about the guy that I started Gyroscope with, Zoran, is he came to me with this fully formed idea of we're going to be this big band and we're going to rehearse twice a week.
Wow.
And we're going to play gigs every week. And, and it really inspired me, like really in a big way. Because I looked at Zoran and I was like, whoa, this guy's got it all figured out. He's got like, the long hair, shreds on guitar. I actually had a drum kit, but I couldn't play drums. And so when I met him at this party, he's like, hey, Dave told me you've got a drum kit. You're a drummer. I said, I've got a drum kit, but I can't play drums. He's like, great, I'll teach you how to play. Let's jam next Sunday.
Wow.
So that's how it started. And then it was just, it was a passion in the early days. And, I finished high school. The band was already playing gigs by that stage. I went to university. I did a commerce degree. I think my first year out of uni, we played 100 shows around Perth. Second year, we did 110 shows. So we took it very seriously and we wanted to make it.
I love that.
But we were crap. So, it took a while to get going.
And you should be. You're not going to be great when you start. That's part of the process of sticking at it.
We started in 96. We released our first album in 2004.
Okay.
So it shows you how long it took for us to write songs that connected with people.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what it's about. And then eventually, we started to see the light. We got signed to a record deal. We all quit our jobs. We all went to Morley Centrelink and signed up for the Dole on the same day together. Band of brothers, solidarity style.
Thank you very much.
I was doing an honours degree at Curtin. I told my lecturer, he was so supportive. He's like, great, take 6 months off, pursue your passion, Rob, go for it. You can always come back, finish your dissertation, don't worry about it. And everyone quit their various jobs. And then we hired a room at the hen house, and that's how we started writing songs. And so eventually, to answer your question, we did eventually, I think we always saw that it could be a career, and then it slowly happened. We only started earning a salary probably in 2007. So it was a long old journey. I mean, I was 26 by the time I actually ever had earned a salary.
But that is, I think that's a really great insight. Having the work ethic, knowing that it's going to take time and you need to stick with it.
Yes.
So 11 years before you really started to see proper success.
Yes.
I can't imagine many people stick at these things for more than a couple of years.
Totally. I mean, I think that's why you need passion for what you do.
Yes.
And just you really enjoy it. I mean, I really enjoyed writing songs with the guys in the band.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the fuel. It's just this enjoyment. We were still living our lives and we were doing other things. And I say, I still got a degree. I didn't go all in from day one.
Yes.
It was this kind of gradual process, but it was just fun. And I look back on it and I'm just so grateful I met those guys.
Yeah.
And the thing I'm almost proudest of is after all we did and, the whole journey we went on as a band, we're still all great mates. I love those guys.
Yeah. And you can see that. It's a real testament to it.
They're legends.
And that's an incredible legacy to have that you can then carry on, because now as a band manager, you are now mentoring and supporting these young up-and-comers, not even up-and-comers, really established. And I've also watched your bands kind of rise the ranks in music, and it must be really incredible to be part of their journey.
It is. It's great. I mean, you go on that journey. I mean, band management, won't lie, that's the hardest gig. It's so much work. RedHook's on tour at the moment in Europe. You know, Emmy's been really sick. She's been battling laryngitis. We almost had to cancel the London show. We had this big agent coming to the London show. It was like, was it going to happen? Wasn't it? She did it. She did amazingly well. I'm now on calls with the agent. He's like, let's do a headline tour. So sometimes that line between like success and failure can also be quite fine.
Yes.
After doing so many years of work. But it's great. It's sort of like, it's a funny thing because like my wife will attest to this, like I'll complain about management a lot and I'm really not a complainer, but I'll be like, oh, this problem, oh, that problem, we've got no money, the cash flow, like you're forever against it. But it's almost like it's just in my DNA. And I've only managed 2 bands, like The Faim, who have now managed for like 8 years, and RedHook, who have managed for 6 years.
Yeah.
And I just put my energy into those 2 bands and I enjoy it. I like the challenge and hopefully, you know, everything I've learned, I can.
You then pass on and then they can learn from as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And also day to day, you manage and own the Hen House,
Yes.
originally in Perth. But tell
Yes.
us about your new venture in Melbourne.
Yeah, so I moved to Melbourne 2 years ago to build Hen House Melbourne.
Yes.
And I was like, great, you know, we'll get there, set up. And I'd always wanted to live in Melbourne. So I wasn't like, you know.
Because you're originally from Perth, right?
I'm from Perth, yeah. We arrived in October 22
Yeah.
and then started looking for warehouses and there's just no warehouses. It's crazy. Like there's no warehouses available in like a 10K radius of Melbourne, like very few.
Yeah.
Anything that turned up was like really poor stock or really good, but they would only give you a 5-year lease.
Right.
And
so you want a longer lease because you've worked with it.
To do what I need to do, you either need to buy the building, which is very expensive here in Melbourne and I can't afford to do that, or you take a long-term lease. So it's actually taken a really long time. And I was walking down this street in Brunswick where I wanted to do this. And I would always walk down this street because there's quite a few warehouses on this street. I actually sometimes go for jogs there, sometimes just walk there, just looking around. Because like most of it gets advertised, but it doesn't always. And the roller door was open and they had a huge skip bin in the middle of the warehouse and they were cleaning it out. I thought, oh, that's interesting because there's nothing else in there except this huge skip bin.
Yeah.
So it was like the address was 5 Tinning Street.
Yeah,
so I just Googled it and then I found the old listing like 4 years ago, called the agent picked up and she was like, oh, Rob, this is really interesting. You're inquiring about the property. They're moving out and it's just going to be sitting open because they've still got a lease for another year. So we're not planning to advertise it, but are you interested? Long story short, I was very interested and we managed to negotiate them out of the lease. I signed a brand new lease and we have a 20-year lease there that I signed. And yeah, we're going to build 18 studios over time. We'll probably start with 11 or 13. Very similar to what we have in Perth, where it'll be podcast, DJ, recording, rehearsal. There'll be a hangout area and it'll just be a really cool creative space for people in Melbourne to, exercise their creativity, their passions, have fun, enjoy themselves. We'll make it a really cool space. We've got a little bit of extra room actually here.
Oh, great.
So I want to have like a couple of just really cool open tables where like, for instance, if you're in the recording studio for 2 hours, you're cutting vocals and, you know, you wrap that 2-hour session, stay. Come to the table. So you obviously leave the recording studio, the next people go in, stay, hang out, put your headphones on, mix the track. Same for podcasting if you want to edit it down there. Oh, I love that. I think it'll be just like a nice hangout space.
Create a community around it.
Yeah, I just want people in and around it all day long, which is a little easier because it's very central. You know, in Perth, we're in Osborne Park, it's very industrial. This site is just off Sydney Road. You're really in the action. So it should be pretty cool.
That's a fantastic area. I can't wait to come down and check it out
myself. It's going to be nice.
Because what you did create was this really beautiful, it was part of an original existing rehearsal studio. And then you created the new space and modernized it and you've continued to innovate the different rehearsal studio spaces available. But then in the time that I've been there, I was part of an original iteration. And then I added the DJ rehearsal studios and the podcast studios. And as you and I have evolved in our respective skills, we're constantly trying things and it's kind of trial and error and you're learning from other people. And even this is a temporary chit chat. So a shorter form, basically more mobile version, because my intention of doing the podcast for Champagne Chats is just the really interesting people that I get to meet.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily go, oh, can you please come into my podcast studio? And like, you have to be able to do this. So this is literally literally iPhones, like a lovely little light.
It's brilliant. What a great setup.
Yeah,
So
and just,
good.
a nice room that we're able to kind of sit here. It doesn't have to be that complicated, but it's about kind of being innovative and trying to work with what you've got.
It's about evolving, being innovative. But it's also about just showing up and doing the work, right?
Yes.
Like, which you are really awesome at doing, and I've seen for years. I mean, you talk about like being innovative and evolving. Like, I think, thinking about the DJ sets you were doing, the live stream DJ sets during COVID, to now like playing the Birdcage at Melbourne Cup. I mean, wow, incredible. That's a long way from room 2 at the Hen House. Hey,
but
it's amazing.
It's a consistent thing is that I had a similar piece of advice, which was just kind of sticking at it, like just know your lane. And I always felt like adjacent to the mainstream DJ, and I didn't feel that I kind of fit that. And I was okay.
Yeah.
And I've just kind of plodded along in my own direction. And then all of a sudden people know you for what you do.
Totally.
And then that becomes an asset rather than, And so I think anyone that you learn in a creative industry, as a tip that I would suggest, is just kind of stick at it. Just kind of back yourself for what you're doing.
And I'll add to that, because I've been thinking about this idea of your lane quite a bit, because I see it with RedHook. So when RedHook started, they were really left of center. It was a bit odd because it was female fronted, heavy band. So it's kind of like in the metal community, but it's female fronted. And it also, there was like hip hop influence, rap influence with metal music, but then there was also EDM influence, pop. So they were actually alienating basically every genre. They weren't metal, they weren't punk, and they were very outside of the lane. But the more now I've seen as they've grown, all that weirdness is what makes them unique. Now they stand out.
Yes.
And the audience has grown with them, and they've picked up people because of their weirdness. And it's kind of like their slogan, their logo, like at the bottom of their new album, it's like, stay weird.
Stay weird.
Yeah. And it's really cool. And I think sometimes it's also worth acknowledging, I'm kind of outside of the lane, just like you were in the DJ community. And you know what? That's okay. And you know what? That might actually be an asset.
Yeah.
And that's actually an advantage.
And if you stick at it, it sometimes does.
Totally, because, as a manager with RedHook in the early days, I didn't necessarily always think of it as an advantage. I was like, gosh, it makes it hard because we don't really fit with the metal bands. We don't fit with the pop punk bands. We don't fit with the rock bands. We definitely don't fit with the pop bands. Yeah. People didn't know. They were like, you could tour with the Veronicas, or you could tour with Seven Dust, or you could tour with Standard Lights. But now that's what makes them special.
Yeah.
And I think similar to your career, that's what makes your career special and really unique.
Oh, I appreciate
that.
So
I don't know if anyone's listening. I think like stay weird, be in your own lane, be a little bit different. It's maybe like the way to stand out in this day and age.
Yeah.
It's good.
When you were talking before about some of the aspects you were finding hard in managing the band, is like you've got your band manager hat on. So you're trying to apply their skills to certain, areas that are going to book them. When you're a performer, you just wanting to do what you do. So it's great that you can let them do what they do. You're not trying to get them to change, but you're having to then find opportunities. So that's why it's difficult, because you're wanting, I'm imagining, to support their creative vision, but then also trying to line up opportunities.
It's a constant, what I love about RedHook, and it's different with the Faim. So with the Faim, I started managing when those guys were like 17. And when you're 17, you really don't have a lot of opinions on certain aspects of what goes into making a career. Yeah. So those guys, they like, if you ask them, what's your artistic vision, for the artwork for the album, it was very hard for them because they haven't lived a life to have that opinion. And when I was their age, I didn't really have opinions on fonts and color schemes. I wasn't worried about it. So with them, I had to inject so much into that. And honestly, that's not ideal, because it really should come from the artist. And they got the Faim. It was just the really early days that it was tough. Whereas RedHook from day one, it's like, no, we're doing this, we're going, So really what I love about that, it's really trying to take their vision. They are the ones driving the bus, and I'm always trying to put fuel into that bus so we can go where we need to go.
Put the feet out of the door, whatever you have to do.
And by fuel, I mean money. And it's hard because you have to also there's realities around it.
Absolutely.
Like, sometimes you have to say, look, we can't do it because it hurts our cash flow. You're not going to have money to record the album. But it's all part of the process.
Part of the creative process.
And it's been interesting.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you what you find. I'm going to put this question specifically in terms of being a band manager. But what do you find is the most rewarding part of your job?
Seeing them play live and seeing a crowd love it. So like they played in London last night.
Oh, wow.
And they're supporting a band over there. And, you know, when you're the support band, you hope there's going to be some people for you. I mean, it was crazy. Like at least 50% of the crowd that rocked up at this sold out show was there for Red.
In London, that's
in
unreal.
London. And the way they were singing along to the songs, the publicist who works for RedHook was there, Hayley. She was sending me videos. She's going, this is bonkers. Look at this. And it's the crowd. They're all singing along to every song. And it was just so cool to see. And they played in Melbourne, a venue called 170 Russell down the road. It's a 1,000 capacity venue. They sold it out. You know, we did a little bit of pyrotechnics in there. We had like confetti. It was really cool to see that RedHook are selling out 1,000 capacity venues and they played so great. Yeah. That's the payoff for me, because at the end of the day, like my favorite part of being in a band was playing live, and I don't do that anymore. Yeah. And I still just love going to watch live bands. But then when I get to see RedHook kick ass like that and see the enthusiasm from the crowd, I mean, that's really the cool thing. Yeah. Because Emmy writes music that is just so relatable to people, because she's so brutally honest. Like it's crazy. Like I can't think of another artist that can talk about sexual assault in such a graphic, honest way, but then also write a song about sexual empowerment and talking about, you know, the fact she loves to give blowjobs. Do you know what I mean? Like, and she will acknowledge this. She acknowledges like, this is a weird paradigm, right? Like I'm talking about sexual assault here in this song. Yeah. But I had to write this song because all my friends who we used to like make jokes and talk about sex were too worried to talk to me about this. Yeah. And I think that's a really brave artist. Very empowering. And that's why I love working with RedHook and I love working with Emmy as a manager, because it's like, even for me, I'm like, wow, that's really putting it out there.
Yeah. And learning as well from these young people. So you've got a lot to imbue on them in terms of information, but on the flip side, they must be teaching you schooling.
I'm always learning, and they've been great to work with, actually.
Incredible.
Both bands.
Yeah. So on the flip side of that, what would you say is the most challenging aspect of this job?
For band management, I think time management is really the killer. You've got like a WhatsApp group message with all the band members on there. That just never ends. Yeah, there is no like at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. the work stops. And also, you know, with the Faim, it was horrendous. Like, because they were signed to BMG Records in LA. They were doing really well in Germany.
So the time zones as well.
Australian. And with the Faim, because, I mean, they signed before they'd released a song, and BMG put this massive budget into the Faim and in our hands. And, I just wanted to grasp it with both hands. So we were trying to build like 5 different markets all at once. So working 5 time zones all at once. So 2017, 18, 19, 20, I look back at that time, I'm like, oh, that was hard. So I think time management's a big thing. RedHook's a bit better. It's more Australia focused. They're on tour at the moment, obviously. So you're still dealing with things overnight. Yeah. And I'm not I certainly am not waking up in the middle of the night to respond to things. I don't do that. I used to do a little bit of that. I don't do that. Yeah. So I think time management's tough. I think managing expectation is tough, because like sometimes I'll get annoyed at the band for like, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that. How come this band got that support tour? We want to do this, you know? Yeah. And then it'll annoy me, because I'm just like, I'm trying my hardest to create opportunity, which good managers do. And then I think back to 27-year-old Robbie Nassif, and I think about what a punish I was for Ray Harvey, our manager, because I was doing the exact same thing, coming up with all sorts of harebrained ideas about how we could sell more pre-order albums. Yeah. And that's what like RedHook do to me. And so then I remember, oh yeah, I was that little punisher as well. And then I go, yeah, okay, I can't be too upset.
It's all part of that cycle, right?
It is.
You were that guy, and then you had Ray Harvey, and
totally.
And then you're going to continue doing that. And as RedHook and The Faim continue, they might end up mentoring younger people. They might already do that by just playing their music. They're probably inspiring a lot of people as we speak without even officially mentoring them.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing I'd say that's just hard, the thing that I always remember just when I do get frustrated with band management is just that you are representing people's hopes, dreams and aspirations.
That's a big.
It is big. Like I was so driven as a youngster in Gyroscope. It was ridiculous. I was so driven. I was obsessed.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like too much.
Yeah.
I was so upset, especially once we started going. Then I just wanted to write better and better songs. I was trying to become a better drummer. I was like, how do we do this? And I always loved the business side of it. And yeah, so I take that quite seriously. And so, yeah, like I try and answer emails quickly. I try and respond to calls. I try and be there for the band. Yeah. And that's probably why I've only managed 2 bands, because when 2 bands are going at the same time, you're really at your limit. The Faim is still on hiatus. I'm only really managing RedHook, and it's enough work, you know.
For sure, particularly with the new venture.
Totally.
Everything else that you know, being a husband, a father and all those other things that like need to be included, because it's all part of the balance.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, is there someone specifically in your career that has been a mentor or a big influence on you and how you've shaped your career?
You know, I wish I had a real proper mentor in business. Like I've just never had that. Yeah. I wish I did though. Yeah. But there's definitely been people that have inspired me and helped me along the way, starting with my dad, who always owned his own businesses. So like when we grew up in South Africa, he had a transport business, this trucking company. Yeah. He had like 18 semi-trailer trucks and he eventually sold that, and the money he made from that is what allowed us to immigrate to Australia.
Fantastic.
But the poor sod like basically lost so much with the exchange rate that I feel bad for him, because he made a really big sacrifice, this successful business, for me and my brother to have a better life in Australia. Yep. But I learned a lot there. And then in Australia, he had a couple of different businesses that were all his own. So my dad was always self-employed. So I learned a lot about business just through looking at my dad, and his dad was self-employed. I'm like 3rd generation self-employed, my own business.
Absolutely.
I almost feel like it's just part of my DNA.
Yeah, I would think so. Like
so that was great.
It's like an inherited entrepreneurialism.
Yeah, but my dad, it's all instinct. It's just all instinct. Like he, you know, like it's crazy to me that he had never run a like cash converters, pawnbroker style business before, but he was like, yeah, I'm going to start one of them in Perth, in Mirrabooka, and just hope for the best. And he did. And it worked out really well.
Fantastic.
You know, and then Mike, the guy that owned R&R Rehearsal Studios, the space that I bought, who I worked for 7 years before I bought it, he was a really interesting entrepreneur as well. 100% pure entrepreneur, like also set up heaps of businesses. And like when I started working at R&R, I would have been like 22. And just watching this guy, I learned, a very charismatic guy. I learned a lot from Mike. Yeah. And I very rarely get to catch up with him because he's so elusive. Yeah. And I doubt very much he'll hear this conversation, but he was a great mentor in a way. And then, yeah, in music, I would say Ray Harvey. She was Gyroscope's manager. She also managed The Living End from day one. She managed The Living End for like 25 years.
Incredible.
She managed Body Jar. She managed Children Collide, 360.
What a CV.
She is an incredible woman. And like...
Was that meant that, did you guys move from Perth to...
No, we stayed in Perth. Yeah, we stayed in Perth. We actually had a manager. We parted ways with our manager in 2007, and our dream manager was Ray Harvey. And we knew Ray Harvey because we had supported The Living End. Yes. By that stage, we had done 2 tours supporting The Living End, including one that was like 35 shows around Australia. And it's so funny, if I think back to like 2003, everyone was like, okay, everyone. Like the tour manager for Living End was like, Ray Harvey's going to be at the show tonight.
Right.
We can't put you in the Living End dressing room. She's very strict. Keep the support bands out of the main dressing room. And everyone, like I'd heard all these stories about like Ray Harvey, so strict and scary. Everyone was really scared of her. And I was like, God, this woman sounds terrifying. And then we saw her. Someone was like, that's Ray Harvey. And she's like probably 5 foot and bright, like dyed red hair. And anyway, we played the show. And I was selling the merchandise after the show, and she came up. I saw her walk up to the merch desk, and she goes, I want to buy that T-shirt. And I was like, oh, hi, Ray, no problem. Yeah, I'm Rob. Here's the shirt, no problem. She goes, no, I want to pay. It's like, oh, you don't need to pay. She goes, no, I'm going to pay. It's like, okay, you can pay. You know, and that was our first interaction. Yeah. And I really admired her just from a distance. And then when we were looking for a manager in 2007, we reached out to like 10 managers. She was the final manager we met. We hit it off. It's really funny, you know, I met Ray I said goodbye to Ray after the meeting. I gave her a hug. I said, Ray, that was amazing. I think we're going to do this. You know, if you want to do it, like Gyroscope, I have to speak to the other guys because it was just me. But she's like, Rob, I want to do it. Hug.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Ray. And then I turned around and there was my future wife, Brianne. She came and gave me a big hug. Like literally, like Ray walked this way. I turned, Brianne hugged me here. And that was our first date for me and Brianne. So
You're
it's like
kidding.
these like two like incredible women
And this
came
like
into my
incredible
life.
moment.
It came into my life at this like exact moment in time. It was Good Friday, March 2007.
Got to choose that one.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was amazing. Yeah. And then Ray became our manager. And so much of the success Gyroscope had was really off the back of her hard work. And then, I ended up marrying this beautiful woman, Brianne. So like in the one night, in the space of like 2 hours, I had this meeting and then that date. And it was
incredible.
Funny how life works out. Yeah.
It's funny how it works out like that. For people in the entertainment industry, what would you say is the most important thing that people should know? It's a very broad question.
It is that I think it runs on passion.
Yes.
Yeah. I think just at the core of it, just passion. You need that fuel that's going to like get you through like not being paid, late nights, disappointments. I always sort of bring it back to passion, like, because that's what sustains you to keep going, to get better. Because like, if you give yourself time and you're working towards something, generally speaking, it does go like this. And it's not a straight line.
Yes.
Of course, you get a bit better, then but the general line is
there's a trajectory at least.
So I would just say passion. I mean, that's a broad answer to a broad question, but I think it holds well.
I think it's a really good answer because I think from what I believe that people wouldn't necessarily understand behind the scenes, they see you like touring the world, managing bands, the glamour of it all is that behind the scenes is the work, the sacrifices, the energy, the things like turning up when you're sick. And there's no like sick leave or like anything like that you have in a traditional job.
Totally.
You're responsible for yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's also your own business. So
and it's
like,
your own business.
You're
self-employed.
You're reinvesting so much of it.
Yes.
I mean, poor RedHook, I'm just like, guys, do you really want to do this overseas tour? You could pocket that money. We could give you that money or we could put you on a basic wage instead of spending that money. Yeah. But they're ambitious and they also understand that part of it is enjoying the journey. Yeah. So like, RedHook, tomorrow they drive to Metz in France. They do the Eurotunnel crossing. They go to Metz. They're playing this festival in somewhere in Germany, Corfest. And they also get it. And I took that with my band, like I reflect and, I wasn't earning money for a while there, but I recorded an album in LA for 8 weeks. And so, it's just...
Yeah, band manager Rob versus drummer Rob.
Yes.
Different ages, different times.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with you at the Hen House because I've come from corporate events where you have like a budget and you spend the money.
Yes.
And I was like, it doesn't quite add up to me how you can do a tour. You're like, oh no, there's no money. You just sleep, like you might sleep in a like public space. You might sleep on the bus. And I was like, oh, that sounds terrible.
I know, it's bizarre.
I was like, it doesn't quite add up. I was trying to do the sums and then you were just basically saying, no, it doesn't add up. It's a grind. You have no money and you are.
I mean,
it's the passion just getting you through.
It's so ridiculous. Like, I just like a very simple example that I sometimes think about was like, I guess I'll share this story, but it was, like touring with The Faim, right, in the early days. So we basically got given this money for tour support and it was like, might as well share the numbers. It was $125,000. They basically say, here, Rob, we're going to give you this money. You can use this to offset the losses as you build this band up globally. So we're trying to build this band that no one's ever heard of up in Europe, firstly. That's where we decided to push first because we figured Triple J is not going to play because it's very commercial. Then we wanted to build the US, then Australia would follow because we sort of thought if we could have success in these overseas markets. Anyway, long story short, the band had never toured. Like they'd never actually toured before. Wow. A couple of them had never been overseas. So for their first big tour, it was sort of 2.5 months across Europe. I tour managed. And because they were all too young to drive, I did all the driving. So I was driving, I was tour managing. And then to save money, we would usually rent Airbnbs and all sleep in the Airbnb. And then, because they were like playing shows, I would usually take the crappiest sleeping location. We would rotate as well. But, I remember like a couple of the band members got into a fight after a show. There was a big tussle. One of the band members broke his wrist. We ended up going to the hospital to like 4 a.m. in the morning. And then I went back to the hotel to crash on the couch. There's like big emotions. There's parents calling me. Like there's a drummer with a broken wrist. There's like upset bandmates. There's upset manager. And, you know, like I get back for my 2.5 hours sleep before we have to do this all day drive to Berlin from Cologne. And I'm sleeping on this couch that's like got this huge sag in it. I'm like 38 years old. I literally like took a picture like this on this crappy couch, sent it to my wife. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I don't need to do this. I've got these great rehearsal studios in Australia that are doing well, that I love working on. Why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. This is the nature of like hard work.
That's the reality of the 15-year-old to be able to get to, you know, 11 years later. It's
hustle, you know, like coming back to what you originally talked about, it's hustle. Like, and even at 38, a couple of years ago when I was doing that, it was because I'm trying to work out a way of how do we make this band successful? And it involves sacrifice from the manager. I can't be above
physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially.
Oh my God.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
So,
but it's very admirable because when I had that conversation with you and I really kind of got to understand the behind the scenes sacrifices of what those bands and DJs are doing when they're touring, just what they're doing. Because I actually, there's a video that I saw, James Hype is a DJ that I've watched and admire. He does like turntable trickery. When we do some DJ lessons, I'll show you some of his.
Thank you.
And he showed this video of him DJing in his apartment, a shared apartment 4 years ago. And he's just like a London bro, just practicing, doing his skills. And when I tell you he's one of the biggest DJs in the world, he is touring in the biggest spaces. But I love the fact that he shows that behind the scenes. He's like, don't forget that putting in the hours now will translate. You don't know when that's going to happen. I can't give you a guarantee, but it will if you just stick at it. And I think that's really good advice of what you're saying as well, is just sticking with it.
I can think of so many examples in my life where I've just seen this. Like The Faim, the first show I ever saw The Faim play was at HQ in Leederville. It was August 2015. Now, 4 years later, August 2019, they were playing in front of 15,000 people in Berlin at the Olympic Stadium with people singing along to the song of their Summer is a Curse. I mean, in 4 years, they went from playing HQ in front of 85 people to, like thousands of people in Berlin. It's crazy. You know, it's bizarre. Like I remember listening to the new Blink-182, What's My Age Again song that came out in 2000, thinking, wow, Blink have stepped it up. This is great. Listen to that album, loved that album. And then like 5 years later, sitting down with Mark Hoppus in Beverly Hills at a sushi restaurant, not knowing what to order because I'd never eaten Japanese before.
Wow.
And he had invited me to lunch because he knew I was in LA and he wanted to produce the second Gyroscope album.
Wow.
And just thinking like, wow, isn't it bizarre how life works out? This is so strange. Wow, I can't believe it. And then I had to be like, Mark, he's like, okay, Rob, what do you want? I'm like, oh, honestly, Mark, I don't know because I've never had Japanese before. Could you order for me? And he's like, thought it was the cutest thing, you know, because he was like, oh, that's so funny. And, but yeah, like I can think of so many examples of how life works in very strange ways. And that's why it's good to only share those stories. It's not to brag, it's to like inspire.
It is.
To go like, okay, here I am trying to do what I'm trying to do. Who knows where this will take me?
Absolutely. And look, I don't think you sharing those stories of you being on a sunken lounge in the middle of the night bragging. I think you're showing like the reality, the high highs and the low lows.
Nothing sexy about that.
So what advice would you give to somebody wanting to get started in the entertainment industry?
I mean, just at its most basic level, just start. Because like I remember I wanted to play drums in a band for probably 2 years before I did play drums in a band. That's why I actually owned a drum kit because I bought it like a year earlier, but I just hadn't worked out how to play it. And then it just took this guy being like, come on, man, let's go. So I think on one hand, it's like just to get started, you know, just to try, or however that is. And the great thing is there's so many good like YouTube tutorials, whatever it is.
YouTube is the best. I've learned so much on YouTube.
Brilliant, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, there's so much stuff you can learn. And then the other thing would be like, I'm an advocate for like, I mean, I love the idea of bands. You know, and I know like we've gravitated away from bands towards people working by themselves. And I think there's great advantages to that too. But there's something really cool if you can find like-minded people. Now, it could be DJing.
Yes.
Like Your Shot's a great example. Your Shot DJ competition where they basically will train you for 8 weeks to learn how to DJ and then you play in a competition. But it's camaraderie. You see all the Your Shot people, they're all buddies with each other. They create a friendship. So like maybe the advice is find a tribe of people, go learn with other people, but just get started and have fun.
Yep.
Be social about it.
Just get started. I think doesn't matter. Just get started.
Totally.
So on that note, just to wrap up,
Sure.
This is essentially an events podcast, but
Yes.
it's events and entertainment.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, what is your best, this is my hashtag,
Yes.
hashtag Wildflower Party Tips.
Great.
What is your best Wildflower Party tip for throwing an unforgettable show?
Well, if I think about events, I actually have thrown a few events myself. Well, we host events at the Hen House every Saturday, but as far as hosting events myself, we've thrown some big parties for the Hen House birthday parties.
Yeah.
I always my tip is, if you can do this, supply as much alcohol as possible. I mean, I remember at the 2000.
That's a really good tip.
Well, it's a great tip because free booze. Who doesn't like free booze?
Yeah.
And I think at the Hen House 10th birthday party in 2021,
Yes.
this is like the record for us. So it was like a 50-litre keg. We finished that. 30 cartons of beer.
Yeah.
Finished that. 24 bottles of wine.
Yeah.
18 bottles of Sailor Jerry's. All free for everyone.
It was sensational.
And it started at 6 and it like literally finished at 12:30 when we ran out of the last bit of keg beer. And it was just awesome. It was such a fun night. I mean, it helped that we had like bands playing and it was just so good. So my top tip for any event, if you want a bit of success, put some free booze on.
Love that.
And hit the sponsors up.
Hit the sponsors.
Hit them up.
Yeah.
I got their Sailor
The
Jerry's
business
for free.
rate is- Exactly.
Totally. Feral Brewing, they gave me 30 cartons for free
They did.
because they understood like it's going to be a big ass party.
Yeah. And they
So-
sponsor your events all the time
They
as
do.
well.
So
just
yeah, I mean,
ask.
yeah.
There's multiple tips. So
Yes,
lots of booze,
yes.
ask for booze,
Yes, and ask
supply
for
the booze.
Yeah, and take lots of photos and then show the booze people, see it was worth it, and create a video. And then hopefully next year when you come hat in hand again, they'll deliver.
So I've had the pleasure of getting to know the entertainment, Rob, but
Yes.
I obviously it's always a pleasure to speak to business, Rob, because
Sure.
you've got so many insights and tips and tricks. And you truly one of the people, having met in Perth at the early days at the Hen House when starting this podcast, that I really wanted to interview. So thank you so much for your time today, because you always tell a good story and it's always so lovely to be in your company. Very excited to see what you have for coming up for Hen House Melbourne and look forward to hanging out and jamming there soon.
No, Kate, you're a legend. It's a pleasure to be here. Cheers
Thank you
to
for joining
you.
me for a champagne
I'm
chat.
so happy for everything
Thank
you're doing
you.
and continued success.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for joining me on Champagne Chit Chats. And if you've enjoyed, please make sure you subscribe on all the usual suspects. And remember, may the only pain in your life be champagne.